With new and unpredictable leadership down south, today's budget will have a major impact on the credibility of this government to deal with the challenges ahead. From coast to coast to coast, people are watching. Trade, oil, manufacturing, the environment, Indigenous groups, small business, all waiting to see what's in it for them. All waiting to see what the future holds. It's Budget Day in Ottawa.
And here's a familiar scene on all budget days. The Prime Minister and the Finance Minister walking down the steps just outside the House of Commons and heading in to talk about their budget, which they say, once again, will be about the middle class. We'll see when they actually read the budget. Bill Morneau, the Finance Minister, Justin Trudeau, of course, the Prime Minister. That was a couple of minutes ago. Right now, inside the House of Commons, there's kind of one of those procedural things going on. The Conservatives have forced a vote in the House today on a matter of process. It's going to delay things a few minutes, not a long time, but it is likely to delay things a few minutes. Just a block or two away in this room is what we call the lockup. That's where reporters have been all day, being briefed by Finance Department officials, getting an opportunity to actually read the budget. And when they come roaring out of those doors down there, they will be able to tell the world, tell the country what's in the federal budget this year. Our David Cochrane is in there, and he will be coming out when they're allowed to come out. They're not allowed to come out until the Finance Minister actually rises in the House of Commons to read the budget. When he does, he will share with us the news of what's in the budget. And hello there, I'm Peter Mansbridge. Budget days always have a sense of drama. This one will be no exception. Will it be, as has been billed these last few days? Has been downplaying it, really, the government, as more or less a kind of stand-pat budget. Or will there be surprises? We'll find out, as we said, in a few minutes. But the other drama that's going on today has nothing to do with Ottawa, has nothing to do with Canada. It was an attack in London, right at the British Parliament buildings at Westminster. The police say they are investigating what they are considering an act of terrorism on the part, it appears, of one person driving a vehicle down Westminster Bridge towards the British Houses of Parliament, knocking down a number of people, and then a policeman trying to stop this driver after he fled from his car. There was an exchange of gunfire. The gunman, or the attacker, appears to have killed the policeman with a knife. Other policemen then shot the attacker. All told, at the end of all this, 4 dead, including the attacker, including that policeman, upwards of 20 injured. So as you can imagine, in London over these last few hours, and still as it is tonight, it's a very difficult situation. We want to bring you quickly up to date. Our Thomas Daggle is in London, not far from the British Houses of Parliament. Thomas, what else can you tell us?
Peter, just in the past couple of minutes, we heard Big Ben toll. It's always that symbol of continuity here in central London, and I think tonight it has special significance. It was just a few steps from here where that man drove onto Westminster Bridge, mowed down several bystanders, and then crashed, emerged with a knife, and tried to enter Parliament before he was shot and killed by police. Tonight, no group, as far as we know, has said that they were responsible for this attack. Police are reportedly looking into any possible ties to ISIS, whether this attacker was inspired by or directed by ISIS. We simply don't know at this point. We'll be looking for more indications from police. They have been getting ready for this sort of attack, knowing that in continental Europe there have been very serious attacks over the past couple of years. Today, a spokesperson for the London Metropolitan Police said this is a day that they were planning for, had hoped would never come, but today it certainly has, Peter.
All right, Thomas, thanks very much. Thomas will keep an eye on this story for us over the next hour as we're on with our budget special. If there are any new developments, of course, we will get back to him. Once again, process underway in the House of Commons. A bit of a delay before the budget is announced, but it does give us an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we are expecting in this budget. Rosemary Barton, the host of Power and Politics, has been on the air, as she often is on days like this, for many hours already. Give us a sense, Rosie, of what you're expecting, because there has been, as we mentioned at the top of the program, there's always this discussion about, is it going to be stand pat, or are they actually going to do something significant? And the most of the commentary seems to be lending itself towards this kind of stand pat side?
Yeah, and that's for a simple reason, Peter. That's because that's what the government has basically been telegraphing, trying to manage expectations around this. If last year's budget was about spending, about changing tax cuts to the middle class, about getting that child benefit out the door, this year's budget is about saying we're going to keep doing things, we're going to keep on this path, but frankly, we don't have a lot of money left. So I think look for some targeted measures around some of the things, again, that they've been telegraphing, whether it be childcare. There's been some indication in the past number of days that they are going to focus a little bit on that and try and help particularly women, because their Economic Advisory Council has said that if you can create more childcare spots, you can get more women in the workforce, and the workforce is a problem in the years ahead in terms of demographics. And I think look to this whole innovation discussion, which I know is hard sometimes for people to wrap their heads around, but I think the government's going to try and find ways to pump money into either universities or the education system to get people prepared for what jobs might be coming. Now, that sounds great, and I'm sure everyone would want their kids to be better equipped to have those high-tech jobs. The problem for the government, though, is that those are jobs that are going to be 10, 20 years down the road. So for me, what I'll be looking for is not just what they're announcing today, but where they think all of this is going. And then finally, the deficit. This is not something they want to talk about. This is, in fact, what they've told us all to not worry about so much. They've obviously abandoned the returning to balance commitment. I don't think we should expect even to see a plan to get back to balance in this budget. What they talk about now is keeping that debt to GDP ratio going down. Will they be able to do that? That's important to ask, because if they don't have a plan to get back to something, that means that the Conservatives now can start talking about a structural deficit, can start going after the government about where they're going to get additional money going forward. And where does that come from? Well, it comes from taxpayers, or it comes from slashing services. So they have to be really careful with the narrative they set up today, because it could have serious consequences down the road.
And as you say, they're certainly setting up a narrative for the Conservatives that could last for the next 3 years, well into the next election. Now, I don't want to go into the weeds on this process thing, but it clearly is delaying things. They're still back and forth inside the House. What's the idea here? The Conservatives are trying to make a point here about the Liberals?
Yeah, basically the government wants to change the way this place works. They want to sit 4 days a week. They say that's better for MPs trying to balance their work-life balance. They want the Prime Minister, this was an election promise, to commit to one question period like we see in the United Kingdom, where they show up and the whole question period is just the Prime Minister taking questions. These kinds of changes, and the opposition parties don't feel they've been consulted enough, feel the government's imposing this on them. So they're using the little things that they have, the tools they have, to make a point, to get people like you and I talking about the issue, to get Canadians to care about it, and to show that the government might be going about this in a ham-fisted way. So the Conservatives are doing it, the NDP are doing it, and no, it's not a huge big deal at the end of the day for the budget to be delayed by 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but it's a smart political move if you're trying to make a point about something and just be a thorn in the government's side on a day when they want to have a good news story out there.
Right, and on a day when all the television networks are focused on a 4 o'clock Ottawa time budget release that now is being delayed. A couple of ironies, actually, in what Rosie was talking about. One of the things they're trying to do is have a similar situation for the Prime Minister on a question period as the British do, which on Wednesdays, today, the Prime Minister in Britain has a question period where just she takes the questions. In this case, Prime Minister May. She, in fact, just finished doing that in London today when the attack happened just outside, and she had to be rushed off. We don't know where. It might have just been to 10 Downing Street, a couple of blocks away, or elsewhere. They haven't really said. The other irony, of course, that it was an attack similar to this just a couple of years ago in Ottawa that had many of the MPs in a lockup situation for most of the day, and it still is that situation for a lot of British MPs right now, as they still continue to go from office to ensure there is no second attacker. They've pretty much indicated that they think it was just the one, but they are going through all the necessary checks. Justin Trudeau actually had something to say about the link between these two stories a couple of hours ago. Here's what he said.
We were all saddened to learn about today's incident near the British Parliament in London and express my deepest condolences to the victims of this cowardly attack. The scene unfolding in London is one that is all too familiar to members of this House who were here 2.5 years ago. Canada and the UK are close friends and allies, and our message to the citizens of the United Kingdom and our colleagues in the British Parliament is simple. We stand with you.
Justin Trudeau just a couple hours ago inside the House of Commons, and as he said, the memory of that day for those MPs who are still in the House of Commons today, who survived the election last year, is a memory that will never go away. You talk to them as individuals, no matter what side of the House they were sitting on, no matter where they were on that day in their various caucus meetings, and they'll never forget it. They'll never forget the kind of terror that rang through their group when they heard the shots ricocheting off the walls just outside of their caucus rooms. Okay, it's still going on inside the House, so we got the opportunity to talk to Peter Armstrong, the host, of course, of On the Money, our nightly business show that looks at, looks at business, but it obviously looks on the impact Parliament and government has Indeed. On business. And so this is a big day for Canadian business leaders as they await all this.
It is. And you know, we've been trying to talk to them leading up to this and get a sense of what they're wanting and what they're hoping and what they're concerned about. And number one across the board is this issue of changes to capital gains tax. There's a deep-seated concern among the business community that this could swing things. We're going to have a guy on the show tonight saying that if they put the inclusion rate, is what they're talking about, going from 50% of capital gains up to as high as 75%, which is where it was in the 1990s, that if that was the case, he'd move his business. He'd go down to the United States, where they're encouraging manufacturers and people to sort of open up shops there. So he says, I just wouldn't be able to sort of withstand that. The other big thing we're hearing about is, as you've heard so much through this, is immigration, visas, being able to get access to high-skilled labor and bringing them in quicker and faster and streamlining that process. It isn't particularly fast right now, and that's a problem that's been raised by Dominic Barton, who you've talked to before, the Council of Economic Advisors, to the Finance Minister, but really to the entire government. And he's raising all kinds of interesting issues about, raise the retirement age and access to OAS and old age security. Streamlining immigration is one of his big things. And then the other one, of course, is jobs and retraining and getting people set for whatever the next sort of economy is going to be. Get it there, because, it doesn't make a ton of sense to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the economy is doing underfoot, because it's going to react to that. It's going to build off that. What you want to do from the government, what business wants from government, is a sense of this is where we're going. This is where we can take things, and this is how we've got to sort of adjust our plan to make sure that it works. And so, again, visas, immigration, and taxes. And the tax competitiveness with the United States is an enormous issue right now. Just briefly,
Rosie and I talking about deficits, always a thing that we tend to talk about and the politicians talk about. Does business worry as much about that deficit number that'll be forecast here?
They do. And maybe not in the same way. And it's not the same debate, but it's about the same thing. And Andrew Coyne, I think, has done some really good work about outlining, should we be talking about, what ratio should we be talking about to sort of GDP or to per capita, and there's different ways of splicing that. But businesses get concerned when governments overstretch and start to find themselves in too much constraint budget-wise, because then they can't get the kind of tax incentives and the training incentives that they'd like to see. Economists, of course, are always sort of, they say that the debt to GDP ratio we're at right now is perfectly fine. It's not something to be concerned about. They come on my show all the time and try to hammer that point home. But even, you hear that from them, then you talk to business owners, and they have that underlying fear because, well, why wouldn't you? If you're trying to get the government to pay for the training of your employees, you don't want them sort of stuck paying the debt from however many years ago.
All right. Don't go too far away.
No, I'll stay.
Eventually, this is going to start.
You would think. We'll keep an eye on it.
And when it does, we'll see what you think business will react to on this. Let's get another sense of what's happening in there. This is what we call the high-wide shot. It's up from a level above the lobby just outside the House of Commons. And looking down at the kind of zoo that takes place in there on a day like this, and in the middle of all that somewhere is, well, there's Julie Van Dusen, and here is Katie Simpson. Katie, what can you tell us about this delay that's happening, without going too deep into the weeds?
Exactly. Well, this is a political stunt, and it appears to be working. Normally, by this time into a budget special, we'd be going through the details of exactly what the government plans to do with taxpayers' money. But we are still waiting for Bill Morneau to stand up in the House of Commons and table that budget, so no one who is in lockup can say anything about what they know so far. So the Conservatives, some of the Conservative staffers were scurrying around talking to members of the media, letting us know that they're trying to make a point. They're upset with what the Liberals want to do in terms of making changes to some procedural issues in the House of Commons, proposals to have the Prime Minister perhaps only attend question period one day a week, and other sort of procedural changes that they're not happy with. And we heard some quite a few heated exchanges in the House of Commons during question period today. Both the Conservatives and the NDP both very upset with this Liberal proposal and stood on the floor of the House of Commons to express that frustration. So as another way to get that point across at a time when so many Canadians are tuning in to find out how their money is going to be spent. Instead, we're waiting for this vote. The Conservatives called a vote to delay the budget. They were hoping to delay it until about 4:30. Unclear if they'll be able to drag it out that long. But for now, we're still waiting. And of course, we are talking about this issue, and that's exactly what they want to have happen.
Exactly. All right, thanks, Katie. Katie will be talking to a number of those people who are directly affected by the budget, including opposition leaders, and including a number of special interest groups that always come to Ottawa on budget days to voice their concerns or their pleasure at what they see has happened inside the budget. And we will try to cover all of that over our allotted time during this news special that is on both the CBC main network, CBC Television, and CBC News Network. All right. You know, one thing Katie talked about was the lockup, and we kind of hinted at it at the top. And just in case you're wondering what that means, reporters from all the various papers and television networks, radio stations, the online groups, get into this lockup. It starts usually around 10 or 10:30 in the morning of a budget day, and they get copies of the budget. So they start reading it, they get briefings. Sometimes the finance minister himself will go inside that lockup, talk to individual reporters, trying to get their spin on their budget, put forward to the various reporters. Then, when he stands up in the House of Commons, they're allowed out of the lockup and they can talk about what they saw. If you're wondering what's the magic around 4 o'clock, or today, later than 4, 4 o'clock Ottawa time is when the release. It's because of the markets. They don't want to affect the markets if there's something in that budget, say, you know, like Peter was talking about, the potential for, all the discussion surrounding a hike in the capital gains tax. Whether that happens or not, we kind of sense it's not going to happen, or if it does, it's going to be quite small. But nevertheless, those kind of things can have an impact when the markets are still open. So that's kind of how the lockup works and why the timing is as it is. Let's go back to Rosie, because not only is the budget getting delayed, but Rosie's program, which starts up again at 5 o'clock, will also get delayed. Listen, do they know that? They'll really be in trouble with you if that happens.
I think you may have done it. I think you might be behind it, frankly.
Right. But did this sort of come out of the blue? Did we know this was coming?
No, this came out. I mean, I'm sure they planned it, but no, this came out of the blue. They started buzzing about it at around 3:30 that they were going to try and do this. So, again, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really matter. But does it put a spoke in the wheels of the government's day? For sure. And sometimes that's enough for the opposition parties. However, I will say this: delaying the tabling of the budget also means that you delay your ability to criticize it and react to it. And if the budget is a stand-pat budget, as you say, and from everything we're hearing, that's essentially what it is. That I think allows for a lot of ground for the opposition parties to go after you. So why they wouldn't want to get out there and start doing that business is a little perplexing to me. But they're going to continue on this. I feel like I can show it to you because the Prime Minister showed it, so I'm going to. What could happen?
And what's the title on it?
Yeah, it's called Building a Strong Middle Class, which is interesting because you might or may not remember that the first budget was called Building. It was called Growing the Middle Class. So this is about, and from everything that I have been told in the past couple of days, about trying to tell the perhaps ill-defined middle class, but the middle class, that this government is helping you, and that we are trying to make you stronger and have more for your kids, and we're looking after your future. One of the things that has become, of course, a point of debate for politicians is what the middle class is. The good news is that most Canadians, wrongly or rightly, define themselves as middle class. So everybody thinks that they're being talked to by the government when they use this kind of language. But the reality is that it is a particular tax bracket that this government is after. And the NDP, for instance, believes that they are not looking after enough of the lower income Canadians, people under $45,000 a year, for instance, and that they're tackling people at the top end of that spectrum too much. Regardless, that the brilliance of saying you're helping the middle class is that you don't ever have to explain necessarily who you're helping. So if the government has done a lot of things already, as they would say, to help the middle class, this budget has to really tell them where they are, how they're better, and then what the government is doing for them and for their kids, and reassuring them. And I think that's where we might see some of that talk around skills and innovation and how to make your kids stronger and better. I think the other thing, though, Peter, that to watch for beyond the deficit is also growth. What is the government saying about growth? Because remember, it never really talked about the measures it was taking for stimulus. It didn't like that word. It said that the measures it was taking around infrastructure, spending, and other things was really about growing the economy, and growing the economy in a fundamentally different direction. So away from, for instance, resource-based positions, sort of lower labor skills markets, and into something else. So can it point to any evidence that anything it's done in the past 18 months or so has it moving in that direction and that growth is on the right track? That's something that I'll be watching for, because it's their own measure that they've given us to look at. So they need to be able to prove that they're doing something on that front.
All right, because you flashed the budget document to everybody.
I've been arrested?
No, but we should say, even if you knew what was in it, you couldn't say anyway because of the agreements based around this. But I don't imagine you've actually had time to read it yet. Anyway, on the fast read. One thing you can tell us.
Yes.
Last year, if my memory serves me right, I actually have it here in my notes. 269 pages. How long is this one?
I can tell you that. 278. But I can also tell you that they've told me that the speech is about 30 minutes, about 3,000 words, which is a little shorter than last year. I think last year's was somewhere in the 40 to 45 minute range. I don't know how telling that is, in fact, because remember, a budget doesn't only put out new spending measures, but it also tells you where things are at and sort of private forecasters' assessment of the economy, and gives you all those sort of big picture things. But the reality is that the government doesn't have a lot of room to spend. So any new spending that is being done here has to be motivated, has to be precise, has to be targeted towards the story that they're trying to tell, which is clearly about the middle class. And innovation. So anything that they're doing new, any new money that they've found is going to be around that. What we need to watch for on the flip side is whether they go after any new revenue, because they're running out of room here. And if they want to start, and again, everything that we've been hearing is that they're not going to do that, that they might tighten up tax credits a little bit, which is fairly easy to do, but doesn't bring in an enormous amount of money. The problem here would be, I would say, that if they don't start going after new spending, new revenue for the government, starting to find places to tax people more, to cut services and to bring in more money, they're running out of runway in terms of an election campaign. And that might sound crazy, given that we're only 2017 and the election's in 2019. But if you want to give Canadians bad news, and you're saying we're going to raise capital gains or we're going to crack down on stock options, deductions, that has to happen sooner rather than later, because politically it becomes more problematic.
Right. It was a rumor racing around parts of our world yesterday about, gee, there might be a raise in the GST. After the drop down to 5 points, it might go up. They ran away so fast from that rumor.
Yeah.
that wasn't going to happen. As some people might think it needs to be, if they're going to get out of this situation. Okay, Rosie, good fill. We may have a bit more yet. Okay. I want to check in with Katie Simpson again, who's in the lobby, not far from Rosie. And I don't remember anything like this happening on a budget day, and I've done a lot of these things over the years, but.
Well, we're hearing that there could be even further delay. Staffers for the NDP are out here to update reporters, and they say that a Conservative MP, Lisa Raitt, has stood on a point of privilege in the House of Commons to say she was prevented by security from entering the House, and that means she was delayed in getting to the vote. I'm not sure if she was unable to vote, but apparently she has stood, according to accounts from both the Conservatives and the NDP. She was unable to get into the House, and that is a breach of privilege. MPs are allowed to come into the House, but she was held up by security on her way in. Now, this could lead to another delay if the Speaker decides to rule on that. So if the Speaker does decide to rule at that point, there could be another debate, and there's no time limit on that debate. So if the Speaker does decide to go in that direction, this delay, there's no necessarily any sort of indication of what's going on in terms of how that may roll out. But you can see there are a number of reporters behind me getting briefed by staffers of the NDP as they're trying to explain, because this is such an unusual situation. Delays like this on Budget Day are not very common, as you mentioned there, Peter. So we're waiting to get more information from inside the House of Commons and find out exactly what happens next.
You know, I understand they're trying to make a point, and they've certainly made it already, but there is a point at which it can backfire on you when you do things like this. I mean, there are people actually waiting to see how their lives are going to be impacted by whatever decisions are made in this budget. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, especially if it continues on. The last time I can remember it all, I think it was in the late 1980s, was a budget that got delayed, or at least had to be changed at the last minute because the finance minister had held up the budget when he was doing the new shoes photo op thing, held up the budget papers in his hand, and one of the cameras caught one of the tax changes in the camera lens. So, you know, you can't do that. You can't have that out beforehand. And so they actually had to rewrite that line. And I can't remember whether they went up $1 million or down $1 million, but they changed it just to be able to say, no, that wasn't an accurate reflection. Anyway, we'll see what happens here today. Thanks, Katie. That's good. Well, here's something we can talk about for a few moments. Carrie Taylor is one of our guests who's helping us on our coverage today. She's a personal finance expert and blogger. She's here in Toronto. And Carrie, obviously, I was going to talk to you at this point about what we just saw in the budget and what difference it makes to me. But for those people who I was just talking about are actually tuning in today to try and find out what impact some of the things that could be in this budget are going to have on them, what are you expecting, or what are you going to be looking for when we get the details?
Well, Peter, some are calling this a gender-based tested budget. So I'm looking at what this means for families. Are they going to extend maternity and paternity leave? Are they going to come up with a child care program? I mean, the current child care program, there isn't one, right? Like, Canadians pay about $20,000 a year, a Honda Civic, in order to put their kid through daycare. It's prohibitively expensive. So I'm hoping to see some relief there. As it stands, Quebec is the only province that has a universal subsidized childcare program, and Quebecers pay between $8 and $20 a day. And compare that to the rest of Canada, where we pay up to $90 a day. That amount of relief would really help Canadians. Now, last year the government brought in the Canada Child Tax Credit benefit, and that amounts to about $6,400 a year, depending on the age of your child. So that was aimed at middle-class families because it's income tested. So it's interesting to see what might happen there.
Okay. Perfect timing, because Bill Morneau is now up on his feet. So we'll just check in as soon as he starts talking. We can look over at the lockup area where the reporters will be let out, and we'll look for our David Cochrane. Finance Minister Bill Morneau. And there's David there now. So we'll get back to Bill Morneau. David, we've waited a long time for you, and we're anxious to hear what you have to tell us.
Yeah, what'd I miss? Well, Peter, you know, it's interesting that there was a pause and a delay in this, because in many ways, this is a pause budget. You know, last year, Bill Morneau, in his first budget, opened the taps big time on spending. This one, sharp contrast, far more modest. So this was expected to be the innovation budget. We are seeing signals from government on where it thinks the economy is going in the future, is showing the sectors that it believes will create the jobs of the future. It's outlining some steps it will take to help Canadians get those jobs, while also announcing measures to help Canadians being affected by things like technology and automation in the workplace, but a very modest budget compared to what we saw a year ago. I want to start first with the financial picture. There is no return to balance in this budget. We are still looking at deficits every year up till 21-22, ranging from about $28.5 billion this year down to about $18.8 billion in 21-22. But there is a $3 billion contingency fund baked into that, Peter, so the deficits will be slightly lower than expected. But all in all, $5.7 billion in new spending over 6 years in this budget. Now, I want to start on the innovation side, as we're calling this the innovation budget. They have outlined the sectors where they think there is going to be growth. They're betting big on 6 key sectors here: advanced manufacturing, agri-food, clean tech, digital industries, health and biosciences, and clean resources. And what you're going to see is a lot of money from organizations like the Business Development Canada, Export Development Canada, and also $950 million in a cluster growth strategy that's designed to basically have companies, anchor companies, team up with smaller companies and post-secondary institutions to come up with an idea and then compete for some of that $950 million to commercialize it and take it to market. They're hoping to create a bunch of mini Silicon Valleys here in Canada, and the target is to double the number of high-growth companies from about 14,000 to 28,000 over the next 5 to 6 years. Now, to do that, you have to build the workforce. So there's a lot of efforts here on giving Canadians the skills they need to take advantage of this new economy. There's a projected job gap of 220,000 jobs in that sector by 2020. So the government is going to pay for things like coding for students in kindergarten to grade 12. It's going to get around the provincial jurisdiction issue by partnering with non-profit groups or non-governmental groups to do that. They're also going to create 10,000 co-op programs for post-secondary students in science and technology to get the skills they need and create that workforce that this sector needs. But a key part here too, Peter, is, you know, as technology creates these jobs, it destroys other jobs. We've seen warnings of as many as 40% of the current jobs will be displaced over 10 years. So the government is going to change the Canada Student Loans Program and change the EI program with student loans so people can leave their job if they feel that they're in vulnerable employment to go back for retraining and qualify for grants and loans. And EI, if they lose their job, they can go into a full-time training program to get the skills they need without losing their EI. So these are the people like Neil from London, Peter, who was part of that special you did with the Prime Minister a year or so ago, who were displaced by these changes. This is them trying to create a safety net for them, an opportunity to retrain and find the new skills to find jobs in this new growth sector. And I heard you talking about family leave a second ago. They are expanding it. They're making good on their election promise to expand parental leave from 12 months to 18 months. You don't get more money for that, you just lower the benefits you get each week and stretch it out over a longer period of time. But that is one of the things they're putting in there for parents, and in particular expectant moms can now apply for maternity benefits 12 weeks before their due date. So those are sort of the new measures in this budget, but Peter, the big sticker numbers in this, the big sticker prices in this are really the details of stuff announced a year ago. One headline out of this, $11 billion over 11 years for a national housing plan, $7 billion over 10 years to create up to 40,000 childcare spaces. Those are big numbers, but they aren't new numbers. This is all from the infrastructure money that was announced a year ago. $185 billion plan that Bill Morneau rolled out over the budget and the fall fiscal update. So it's not necessarily new. We are just getting the details of what they're doing last year. In a lot of ways, Peter, this budget implements the budget from a year ago by fleshing out the details of those big picture infrastructure announcements that the first year was based on.
All right, great job, David. Let me just follow up quickly on one point. There's been a lot of talk in the last few days, last few weeks really, that there was only so far Morneau could go because he didn't know how far the Trump people were going to go, especially on some business incentives in his country. So in terms of that, Peter Armstrong was here a few minutes ago talking about the fear in the business community there was going to be a change in the capital gains tax situation. Is there anything in there like that?
They can calm down a little bit, at least for now. So you're right, Trump has had a huge impact on this, and this is where the pause button comes in. The big review of taxes, they made minor tinkering. The elimination of some small credits, the public transit tax is gone, tobacco is going to go up slightly tonight, alcohol is going to go up slightly, and they're doing things like changing the way the GST and the HST applies to things like Uber to bring it more in line with the taxi industry. But all of those big picture things, capital gains, corporate taxes, all of that is delayed. There's going to be a review. I'm told by a government official we're going to see something specific on this in the fall fiscal update, but they are waiting on taxes in a big way to see what Donald Trump is going to do. I mean, I was talking to an official inside the lockup earlier. If he goes heavy on taxes and then helps pay for his tax cuts with some sort of a border adjustment tax, for example, that could just slash Canadian growth. And they're taking this wait-and-see approach because they want to leave their options open. They flat out admitted that the uncertainty surrounding what's happening in Washington has completely interrupted the planning cycle here in Ottawa. So because of that, you had this very modest approach, no bold moves on taxes, just tinkering, and also no big moves on defense, Peter. There's no new money for defense in this. There is a defense policy review that we're going to get the results of later this year, but on the defense side of things, they're getting pressure from people like Trump to increase their NATO commitments. There's no new money, and in fact, our colleague Murray Brewster is filing a story on this. They've taken $8.5 billion for military equipment that was supposed to be spent around now. They're punting it 20 years down the road to 2035, 2036.
All right.
So there's no new money for defense, a delay in some spending, and a big delay on taxes.
Let me just remind everybody what you told us at the top of your hit here about the deficit numbers, because there are those who look at these very carefully to kind of judge really the direction the government is going. They kind of teased everybody with their first budget saying they'd be in balance by the end of the first term. That's not going to happen, as David said. These are the numbers as we look at the forecast on this day. The 2017-2018 budget deficit number, $28.5 billion. So in other words, the debt, the national debt, will go up another $28.5 billion as a result of this next year. And then over the years right through until 2021-22, the deficit will continue before, which is their closest to forecast to balanced budget, that it's going to take that long. So they're going to have to get through at least one more election if they can win it with still a deficit number. When they were, I don't imagine that really surprised anyone. They'd already kind of backed off from their first budget forecast, but now they're really pushing it forward into the future.
Yeah, the election campaign was, we'll balance by the end of the first term. The first budget was, forget about balance. We're going to focus on declining the debt to GDP ratio over a period of time. Well, they've even gone away from that. I mean, there is a contingency reserve in this, right? $3 billion of those budgets is contingent, of those deficits is contingency. So you do have that flexibility you can reduce it by, but the targets for their debt to GDP, even those are being pushed off. And Peter, there was this report that the Finance Department released just before Christmas that says with the current track they're on, you're not going to see a balanced budget in Ottawa until about 2055. Right? I mean, I just had a kid before Christmas. He's going to be 40 before they see a balanced budget, unless they make some big changes to their fiscal plan going ahead.
Well, I will definitely miss that one. Thank you, David. Great work as always. I don't know how you do that. Good stuff. David Cochran reporting from just outside the lockup. Let's go back to the lobby outside the House of Commons, where Rosie Barton has been watching all this to get her first take on what we've heard from David and what she's seen looking through those documents.
Well, I mean, a couple things. They did a pretty good job making sure we didn't expect much, and with good reason, because there isn't a whole lot in here. And I think it's for a lot of the reasons that David was talking about. First of all, there isn't a lot left. So they had to go after some places where they knew they needed to get a little bit more money. They have, for instance, given more than $3 billion more to some Indigenous issues, health, education, infrastructure. They know that that is an area where they have made it a priority. They need to put some more money there to try and ramp up what they're doing over time. They also listened to a lot of the people that they were talking to. For instance, there had also been that rumor that they would cap the stock option deduction. That's nowhere to be seen. They've totally walked away from that. It was an election promise. There was a venture capital fund. This is essentially what helps small companies start to build because the government lends them some money. That program was in fact created by the previous government. It was set to expire. The government has renewed that project, added another $400 million to it. So that's really putting their money where their mouth is in terms of saying, here's innovation, here's the kinds of things that we want to do. The other part of this, and as David mentioned, is leaving all the tax changes until we see what happens south of the border. That's smart, but it's also very risky. First of all, obviously you can't ignore what's happening with the administration, but nor should you be formulating policy based on what the president is doing. I had a Republican congressman on Tuesday who said to me that the border adjustment tax has to happen. Republicans believe in it because otherwise they can't lower corporate taxes. They can't afford to do that in Washington. Well, if there's a border adjustment tax of 20% on imports in the United States, that's pretty damaging for us. So I get why the government is not going full throttle with other sort of tax increases. On the other hand, and this speaks to my point earlier, the longer you have to wait to put those things in place, the closer you are to an election, and that becomes problematic for them for all sorts of political reasons. The capital gains tax, there were ways to deal with that, I think, that would have affected part of the population, maybe not everybody. Maybe go after people that are sort of real estate moguls, snapping up tons of condos in Toronto and Vancouver, but not go after people who have put all their money into real estate as part of their retirement planning. But again, because they're so nervous about what's happening down there and how that's going to unfold, they're walking away from those things for now, which, again, may be smart in the short term. I don't know about the long term, though.
Rosie, I got to jump in here because Rona Ambrose, leader of the Conservative Party, is now speaking on her reaction to the budget. Here she is.
Completely out of step with the challenges that regular, ordinary people have when they're trying to pay for the cost of living. This budget also misses a critical opportunity to respond to, on behalf of Canadians, to respond to Trump's aggressive move forward to reduce taxes on both businesses and individuals. There are no tax breaks here on income taxes, no tax breaks here for businesses. In fact, taxes are going up for small businesses. But most concerning today is how the budget raises taxes and user fees all over the place. As I said, everything from taking the bus, everything from buying yourself some beer, everything from using Uber to, of course, and you multiply that on top of all of the tax benefits that were taken away from families last year, whether it was for fitness classes, arts classes, whether it was for textbooks and tuitions, all of those breaks that families use to make the cost of living more affordable. Pile on top of that the carbon tax, which affects home heating, which affects how much we pay to put gas in the tank. So let me be clear. We are going to be the voice of taxpayers. And on behalf of taxpayers, what I say is Canadians are paying way too much tax already. The federal government does not have a revenue problem. They clearly have a spending problem. And this is a budget that spends billions more dollars on things that regular working people are not going to be able to take advantage of. Let me just give you an example. If you have what's called a super cluster venture capital accelerator, you're in luck. Those are the kinds of people that are going to get...
Well, there's Rona Ambrose, the leader of the Conservative Party. Opposition parties are there to oppose, and Rona Ambrose is certainly opposing today, but you watched how she's doing it. She's doing it in a very focused way in targeting Canadians and their individual situations in their homes on everything from the cost of transportation to you name it, and focusing on those areas, saying everything's going up. This government is letting you down. We're going to be your voice. So that's the word from Rona Ambrose, the leader of the Conservative Party. I'm sure we'll hear from Tom Mulcair in the next few minutes as well, the leader of the NDP. Joining us now, Avery Schenfeld, who's often helped us on days like this. He's the chief economist for CIBC Capital Markets, and he's inside the lockup, so he's had a chance to listen to all the spin all throughout this day. But I'm sure he cuts through it in a way that many of us often cannot do. So Avery, when you look at this document, any surprises to you?
Well, the surprise really is how little more there was to do. And maybe that's just a sign that they scooped themselves. Last year, they announced so many billions in unallocated infrastructure spending that really this year was all about telling us where that money was going. And I guess the best news for the investment community is what wasn't done. So there wasn't a grab on capital gains income, for example. There wasn't an increase in any business taxes that are material here. And maybe that is a sign that the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister are paying attention to the competitive challenges coming from the U.S.
So how would you rate it? Given all the difficulties they have right now.
I think it's a watch and wait budget largely. The economy is actually improving. So it's not like we needed a lot of fresh stimulus above and beyond what they had already announced last year. And I think they're right to implicitly say, we don't know whether Trump is going to be good for Canada because the U.S. is going to pick up, or bad for Canada because they're going to impose these trade barriers or make taxes so much more competitive there that we lose out. So it's a wait and see, and I think the real challenge will be drawing up next year's budget when we know a little bit more about what's happening stateside.
All right, Avery, thanks very much. Appreciate your time, as always. All right, Peter Armstrong's back with us, and you talked about that fear that many in the business community had on the capital gains tax. Didn't happen.
They're going to come out happy about that. And just the whole notion that we're in a wait and see, I think businesses wanted to see that. I think businesses, I mean, they're so concerned about what's happening with the United States and about how this is where, I mean, a lot of businesses have a natural distrust of government. This is where those two worlds really come together. About if I've got, a factory in southwestern Ontario, we make a widget that goes into an engine in Detroit that then gets put into a car in Mexico and then brought back up for finishing in Oakville. Well, how do I make sure that my involvement in that supply chain is held up? You're going to lobby, you're going to do your thing, but you're really going to count on the federal government to make sure that it's got that relationship and that you're not being too heavily taxed. And I think they look at that sort of global picture with great concern right now because there's so many unknowns. And I think they look at this budget right now and say the government appears at least to recognize that. They haven't gone sort of wild. As Avery was saying, the economic assumptions that are built into this are actually, they're based on the private sector economists that came out with their forecast in January. So they're probably not even quite as high as the economy because it's ticked along quite a bit since then. Whether you're looking at labor, you're looking at GDP, or you're looking at the jobs in general, the economic data are backing up this fact that the government, that the economy in Canada is picking up a little bit of steam. So let's let that happen. Let's not get in its way with too many taxes or too many new regulations. I think they'll be really encouraged by the Innovation Fund. Though, I mean, I was talking to Jim Balsillie about, he wrote a big piece in the Globe about that this weekend, that it's not just money. You need a focus and you need a real clear idea about how you're going to do that. But I think there's a real sense that a recognition of that and the importance of that in that the money that's put forward. The Innovation Fund, I think, is going to be really interesting to see. So, I mean, there's a lot here. But as Avery says, the economy is doing better than it was last year. All the concerns around the budget last year were about the economic fundamentals in Canada. Now it's all about the political rhetoric out of Washington and how do we navigate.
And that's where the fear is about the tentative nature of how well the economy may or may not be doing. Just briefly, any surprises there? Anything in there you weren't expecting, or something that you thought would be there that isn't there?
Well, I am interested. I would love to know the backstory of how they moved away from and what they talked about in terms of the capital gains tax. Right. You talked about the GST thing, but they move very quickly back from that. And you get the sense that this is not the budget that they wanted to introduce even 6 months ago, and that they've adapted on the fly. And I think that'll buy them some credibility. And I think that will buy them at least a little bit more rope to say, okay, well, let's watch. And it won't even be the next budget. It'll be the next fall update that everybody will watch.
All right, you won't want to miss Peter's show tonight on the money. Be coming up in a couple of hours. Let's go back into the House. Bill Morneau, the finance minister, talking about this area that we had mentioned earlier about gender equity. Watch this.
Quality child care. Too often we hear stories of single parents living in poverty because the cost of child care is so high that they can't afford to go back to work. And that's not acceptable in our country. To help low and middle income families with the cost of child care, we're committing $7 billion over the next decade to increase the number of high-quality child care spaces available across our country. In order to provide immediate relief, this will be working together with provinces and territories, and we know that doing this could create up to 40,000 new subsidized child care spaces over the next 3 years. Canadian parents deserve our support, and we're delivering. Mr. Speaker, we know that strong partnerships between the federal government and Indigenous communities are crucial for our success. Over the next 5 years, funding for Indigenous peoples will have increased by over 27%.
Bill Morneau speaking inside the House of Commons, moving now into the area of Indigenous issues. Just briefly, $7 billion for childcare over the next 10 years is one of the areas in terms of women issues. We talked about Tom O'Kerr coming out to speak to reporters. Here he is now.
That the rich are getting what they want, ordinary Canadians are not getting what they need. I'll give you one example. Mr. Trudeau promised during the campaign to get rid of the stock option tax loophole. He voted last week a motion that called upon the government to get rid of the stock option tax loophole. That's not in the budget. That's $725 million. Now, some of that money, if we had gotten rid of it, as the Liberals promised to do, could have been used to provide the $155 million still missing for First Nations children on reserves, so that the discrimination against them for their social services would come to an end. One of the shocks in the budget is that despite the pronouncements in Paris at the signing of the accord, Canada is actually reducing what it's spending to fight climate change, and that is scandalous. It's an abdication of our responsibility to future generations. They're cutting $750 million this year, $500 million next year. Oh, but they're promising that come election year, they're miraculously going to start putting some of this back. That is a theme that you will see in looking at this budget, that there's a lot of stalling, a lot of things are being shoveled forward. Je me permets aussi de mentionner
I'd also like to
que dans ce budget,
that in this
il n'y a
budget,
pas un sou
there is not 1
pour les
cent
producteurs laitiers
for the
qui sont
dairy
attaqués par un
producers who are
stratagème
being
des
attacked
États-Unis
by the
pour
United
suborner
States
et miner notre système
to
de gestion
try
de l'offre
and
dans le domaine
undermine
du lait
our
au Canada.
system in
Il n'y a
Canada.
pas un sou
There is
pour
not
le secteur
1 cent in
forestier
here
et
for the
rappelons-nous,
forest sector. And it's important to remember that right across
All right,
Canada,
Tom O'Kerr, he not happy either. Another opposition leader who's lined up against this budget. We want to go to Rosie Barton in Ottawa one more time. She's got to get organized for her show that's coming up in less than 10 minutes. So one quick last word from you, Rosie, on what we've witnessed here.
One word I would say, and that is how is the government going to tell this story? This is now a sales job, essentially, for the government about how, in fact, it is helping this middle class, how it is helping Canadians. If Canadians don't feel soon that there has been an improvement in their lives, then they're going to start questioning what this government is doing. The government will say, we gave you increased child benefit, we've cut taxes for the middle class, we're taxing the top earners. But it needs to start telling that story across the country. And childcare spaces, housing, that kind of stuff may be the examples that it can push to and point to when it's telling that story. Last word I would say about the deficit. Which is growing, and the government had given itself a new fiscal anchor, which was the decrease of the debt to GDP ratio over time. In fact, this budget shows that it doesn't really move very much over time. And that, I think, also becomes a problem for the government. If you can't start explaining how you're going to get out of this, I think it becomes politically a weakness for you, certainly.
All right, Rosie, thanks very much. Rosie Barton, and she'll be up in 8 minutes' time on CBC News Network with Power and Politics. Thanks, Rosie. A quick hit with our at-issue folks. Chantel and Andrew are here. They're both in the lockup today. We've got 3 or 4 minutes, which isn't a lot of time, but then some might say you don't need a lot of time to talk about what was in this budget. Andrew.
The image that comes to mind, Peter, is an upside-down duck. You know how when a duck is moving through the water, it appears to be moving serenely, but underneath the surface, the legs are working furiously? What we have here is an enormous effort to try and make the appearance of lots of action going on, but none of it's going to make a dime's worth of difference. They're not spending any new money. It's all reapportioned. There's a lot of micro stuff that will be, I'm sure, be received gratefully by its recipients, but isn't going to have any impact on the economy. Now, whether that's because they've run out of money or they're waiting to see what Donald Trump does or they just run out of ideas, I don't know. But it really doesn't add up to very much.
Well, you'd hope they haven't run out of ideas. They've only been there for a year, year and a half.
You would think.
Yeah, Chantal?
You would think this is the budget of a 3-term government that has run out of energy and resources, doesn't want to tackle more. I would be tempted to call it the most cynical budget I've covered, except that would also imply that maybe it's politically smart. And I don't think that it is. It shovels everything forward. It's actually, in the words of many here in this lockup, not a budget. I think it makes the Liberals in caucus the first audience for the sales job, because it makes all of them vulnerable. Those on the right to the absence of a plan to return to balanced budgets. Those on the left to the absence of actual action on fronts like childcare, and go down the list. None of these spending promises kick in until the pre-election year.
You know, Rosie talked about how they're going to sell this. And it is a good question. I mean, how do you sell something that doesn't appear to really have a lot of content to it? How do you go about that?
Well, they've been very good at activating buzzwords and grand phrases and the sweeping gestures. And so there's a lot of talk in here about innovation, and some people will be impressed by that. People love to hear about skills and universities and innovation, you know, high tech. A lot of it is, as I say, mostly it's pointless, but a lot of it is pretty old-fashioned 1970s or even indeed 1930s style industrial planning. They've staked their colors on, we're going to pick which of the industries are going to be the future, because somehow the people who are investing their own money can't figure that out for themselves. That'll impress some people.
All right, Chantal.
It will also help that, it will help that it doesn't really hurt anyone directly or very harshly, unless you're drinking wine possibly, or you lose your credit on your transit pass. So a lot of people will say, phew, nothing bad happened to me, so I guess that's good enough for this budget. But for a second-year government, it's a pretty sad document.
All right. We thank you both, and we will see Chantal and Andrew later on this evening on The National, where we'll have a regular length ad issue. Jennifer Ditchburn will join us as well. Thanks to both of you. Carrie Taylor, our personal finance expert, is there with us. We talked a little bit about what you were expecting. What did you see?
Oh my goodness. Well, this is not a government that loves boutique tax credits. So they phased out the transit tax credit this year, and last year they did away with the children's fitness credit and the arts credit. So if you're into these boutique tax credits, you're going to have to say sayonara to those. They also are phasing out the Canada Savings Bond program. Remember those? Those used to be really profitable for Canadians like 15, 20 years ago when interest rates were high, but those will be phased out now. Uber, my goodness, so Uber is going to be taxed with new rules to make them more competitive with taxis, so that you're going to be looking at your Uber rides going up with comparable GST and HST. Now, when it comes to gender parity and the wage gap, the government's going to do a program that looks into the disparity between what women make and what men make. And I come from a high-tech background, so I tell you, I was earning probably about 78% of what my male colleagues were making. So I would really like to see what they plan to do with this, especially since they're talking so much about innovation and bringing, teaching children about coding at such an early age. With computer science, I know from experience there's very few women in those fields, so I'd like to see what they're going to do with this program to bring that up. Yeah. And when it comes to childcare, well, I'm all for more childcare spots, but what does it cost for families? Right now, it's, if you have 2 kids in childcare, it can cost up to $3,000 a month, which is unbelievably expensive for families. So I'd like to see what happens and how much that costs per family with all these new licensed childcare spots.
Well, and as you say, in so many of these issues, you need to see the detail on how they're going to do it. Well, it's one thing to talk the good game. You got to see the detail to see whether that's even possible.
Well, when they say that they're putting $7 billion towards it with 40,000 new spaces across Canada, to me it doesn't sound as appealing as what Quebec has, a subsidized childcare program, which helps families pay for childcare and makes it easy decision for families to go back to work. So going back to work was the hardest decision and most expensive decision I had to make, and it's really hard for families moving forward that are in the same boat.
All right, Carrie, thanks very much for your time again today. Quick last word from Katie Simpson in Ottawa. We got a minute for you, Katie.
And Peter, we'll be really quick, I promise. I'm joined now by Cindy Blackstock, who, of course, is one of Canada's most well-known advocates for Indigenous children. You're saying there was nothing in there for Indigenous children in this budget?
Nothing in there, despite 3 legal orders for the Government of Canada to comply and make sure that this generation of First Nations children isn't unnecessarily removed from their families because of Canada's inequitable funding. That discrimination continues today.
Now, they did announce another $3.4 billion over 5 years for infrastructure, health, and education. Will that help some of those kids?
That might help some of those kids, but not the children in child welfare care, and it won't stop the separation of these children from their families. That's going to continue to go on in this country. In fact, we're at hearings this week to find Canada in further non-compliance with legal orders. Canada is saying it's above the law. It doesn't owe First Nations children equality in this country. I think it's a sad day for the nation.
All right, thank you very much, Cindy. Peter, back to you.
All right, Katie, thank you. And we've heard Cindy Blackstock talk in that way, for those who support her, too many times now in the recent past. She's just not getting to where she wanted to go. All right, that wraps up our special coverage. More on your Supper Hour newscast and the National, of course, later tonight, online on News Network. We close with this from Bill Morneau.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2017 is about creating good middle-class jobs now and in the years to come. And to do that, we need to focus on our strengths, where we can lead globally and create good jobs for Canadians. In this budget, we're making investments in 6 economic sectors where Canada can lead the way: digital, clean tech, agri-food, advanced manufacturing, biosciences, and clean resources.
I'm Rosemary Barton, live from the foyer of the House of Commons today on a special edition of Power and Politics Spending Plan. The federal government delivers a spending plan with not a whole lot of spending, at least not as much as we saw last year. Where is it focusing taxpayers' dollars, and when does it plan to balance the books? We'll bring you all the breaking analysis, the man of the